there should be enough for everybody. So if you take one of those, that'll help us get started. I got these from a conference I went to this week. Every year I go to the financial planning conference, and they talk about stuff that sort of relates to financial planning, and this was one of the speakers. He's a nationally recognized mediator, and this was a really good speech, and I thought that this is something that everybody could use because unfortunately we all have conflict. If I were to ask you to remember a time where you've had conflict with somebody, whether recent or maybe something that sticks out in your mind, everybody can pull up a memory of a conflict they've had. And for most of us, we can think of, maybe we said something we shouldn't have, or the other person said something that we really wish they hadn't, or the resolution wasn't the way we'd hoped. But conflict, we can all agree, is generally very difficult to navigate. So I want to talk to you about 3 things that really stuck out to me. 2 of them are in this booklet and 1 is not. The first is managing emotions, which is something the speaker talked about because as a mediator, he doesn't have the issue that we would have if we were involved in a conflict. We have to manage our emotions. And then active listening and eliminating us versus them thinking. So first, we talk about managing emotions. So I better be careful what I say about Walt since he's my evaluator. But last time we were here, we were talking to other people in our lives about our beliefs and kind of how we did that. And Walt mentioned a couple family members that he had differences of opinion with. And he said, I knew I was supposed to ask them why they thought what they thought. And instead I said some sort of factual information. And the conversation didn't quite go maybe as he'd hoped. And I thought about that for a while, Walt, after you said that, because I do that too, probably far worse than whatever you did. But there's a lot of times in my life where I'm having a disagreement with somebody, and I know I'm not supposed to say the thing that I'm thinking, but I want to so bad. And a lot of times I do, because in that moment it feels right. And of course it's not, it makes things worse. So the first thing that the speaker talked about was managing emotions. And he said that our brains are 98% emotional and 2% rational. I don't know where he got that information. I really, really hope he's wrong, because that's disappointing. But I know that we are all emotional creatures. And when we experience stress, we have physiological changes. We have hormonal changes, we get cortisol. It makes it difficult to think clearly. So the first step if you're in a conflict is to recognize that you're experiencing physiological changes and to work with managing those. The way to do that, I don't have any miracle solutions, but what does actually work, science says, is deep breathing. You can basically trick your body into thinking something else is going on. If you take very deep, slow breaths, the system in your body that is reacting to stress, the amygdala, sort of wonders if maybe everything is actually okay. And so you can change the physiological symptoms through deep breathing. You can also take a break. And you don't have to say, I'm losing it, I need a break. You can just say, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And so the first thing, if you're in a situation of conflict, is to recognize that you are going to have an emotional response and to come up with a proactive plan to manage that instead of just hoping that it won't happen, because it does. And so the next thing he talked about, if you open your little booklet, it says 10 steps here. This is where the summary of the other information is. And he says the first thing you have to do is define the problem, which if you've ever been married can actually be kind of confusing, because you'll start talking about one problem and all of a sudden you're talking about 10 years of experiences, and it gets confusing what actually the topic is. So the first thing is to define what it actually is that you're discussing. And then after that, step 2 is to listen. And so that goes back to what Walt said, where he was saying, you should have asked for more information. And it is very hard to listen. So if you open this up, in the middle, there's a little tiny section on active listening, and it talks about what being a good listener is. And for me, being this kind of listener takes an effort of will. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing to be this kind of listener, because sometimes it's Sometimes it looks like I'm listening, but really I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, and I'm watching the other person's mouth move, and I'm noticing when that stops so that I can say what I was going to say. So that's not listening, that doesn't count. So active listening is definitely the first step, and the reason that that is step 2 on his list is that most people can't receive information until they feel heard. So if you're in a conflict with somebody, what they want most in that moment is to feel heard. And if you can listen to them and give them that, then you have a much better shot of them listening to you in turn. So that's why listen is step 2 on his list. Step 3 is to identify and clarify interests. And this goes into something that is also natural for humans, but takes effort for me to resist, and that is that us versus them thinking. So we do that with all kinds of things. We do it with sports teams, with what state we're from, with our religious and political beliefs, with countries, all kinds of things. We say, I'm on team A and you're on team B for whatever reason, and so you're the enemy. And definitely when we're in a conflict, it's very easy to step into that. You know, we have a disagreement about whatever subject, and so immediately I'm on this side of the fence and you're on the other side of the fence, and we are enemies. Conflict resolution is about not falling into that trap. It's about not thinking that way. It's about identifying what it is that we have in common. So my neighbor and I, if we both have kids, and let's say she's a devout Catholic and I'm an atheist, but we both agree that primary education is important. Well, we have common interest. And so that's something that can be built on. So everybody in this room has common interests, and we all have common interests with all the other people in our lives. Conflict resolution is often about identifying those interests and building on them instead of falling into that us versus them trap. There are other useful things in this book. Those first 3 seem like just the start, but really they're the meat of it. After that, he just talks about figuring out what the options are and picking one, basically. So the other things in this booklet that you might want to check out are how to raise an issue, the difference between people and problems, and things to consider if you really can't come to a resolution. So that is what I wanted to talk to you about, and that's all I've got.